orders here for this evening. I'd like to first of all to say that the Lenswood Forest Range CFS Brigade was established in 1951, so that's 71 years ago. Before the 83 Ash Wednesday fires, life was a bit simpler than in regards to formalised training. After then, Ash Wednesday fires, a coronial inquest said that we needed more formal training and better equipment and introduced the standards of fire cover. Prior to this time, training was fairly loose to say the least, and was more like an adventure camp than CFS as we know it today. As a result of these times, many memories were formed, as we're about to hear. So I'd like to introduce our storytellers for this evening. On the far right-hand side, it's Warren Murdoch. He joined in 1962. He received his 50-year service award in 2012. His highest position of the brigade of lieutenant, and was secretary treasurer for 24 years. He became deputy group captain in 1989 for 10 years and has received his national medal and CFS life membership. Incidentally, I said group captain. They used to be called group captains before they then changed to group officer. Campbell in the middle. Cam Stafford joined in October 1959, still a member with 62 years. Highest held position in the brigade of captain for 21 years, currently president of our management committee, became Onkabringer Group's first group captain in 1989 for 10 years and has received the Australian Fire Service Medal, National Medal, CFS and SES Life membership. On this far end we've got Kim Green. He joined in 1979, same day as me actually, until 2000, was a member for 21 years and held the highest position of lieutenant. We have an apology tonight to Roger Norton. I make mention of Rog because he was quite instrumental with our award that sits up there in the cupboard called the Norton Award, who joined in 1966 until 2013, was a member for 47 years. Highest held position of captain for 3 years, and he received the National Medal and CFS Life membership also. And then there's myself, David Kumnick. I joined in 79, still a member with 43 years. I hold the position of captain, has been for 16 years, and received National Medal, National Emergency Services Medal, CFS and SES Life membership. So between the four of us we have a combined total of 223 years of service. Behind the camera tonight we've got Peter Stafford, who's filming this event for the Lenswood Forest Range, Forest Range and Lenswood History Group. So on a conversation I had with Roger the other day, as I said, he was an apology. I'm going to kick off with a quick story on his behalf. And Roger asked me to relate this in his absence. Incidentally, it does star him quite well, so we'll see how we go. Well, it was a hot summer's night, and we were out driving around with the two trucks as per usual, and we wanted to go up to Plummer's Tank up on the top end of Plummer's Road just to check the water levels for there's the only form of water source up there, and someone said to Tim Collins, who was there, scurry up and see how much water there is. So there's a ladder on the side of the tank, so we scurried up and we said, how much water's in there? Without a word, he just jumped in, fully clothed, splash. Well, obviously there's water in there. So being a hot night, it didn't take much encouragement, and the rest of us all jumped in, but we peeled our overalls and kicked our boots off. So off we went, we had a bit of a swim. So we were splashing around there for quite a while. Oh, well, time to go. So we all start coming out and we spot, there's Rog Norton standing over there, and he's meticulously taking all his clothes off, folding them up, putting them on the ground, and he was stark naked in the full moonlight, and he was stark naked. So here we are, dripping wet in our PPE. So then Roger then turns around and climbs the ladder. It's a high tank, and all we can see is his bare ass going up into the tank, and he goes in there splashing around. Next minute we get a call on the radio. There's already been a fire down at Mount Compass, and they're looking for a strike team to leave. So Onkabringer was asked to provide a strike team, so we had to head off. So here we are, trying to encourage Roger to come out the tank and then wait for him to get dressed again. The whole idea was so his clothes didn't get wet, but he's put them on again, so he was wet through as well. And then finally got in the truck and off we went. So that was on behalf of Roger. And that's it. So someone else like to kick off?
I'll go while we're on Roger.
This could take a while.
Yeah, you always got to have someone at the butt of someone's joke. A Sunday morning there was a fire over on Patea Park Road, and all the boys roll up, and Roger had been to church, he had his good clothes on, and we're ready to go, and he's pulled in, and he's in a hurry, he's taking his shirt off, and he's taking his pants off, but he left his shoes on. And he's trying to get the pants down over the shoes, and he's standing there with his Y fronts on, forlorn. Roger, we're going. And he said, I can't get them off. I can't get them off. I said, well, we're going. So we left him just nearly stark naked in the yard, but he was there for ages trying to get his pants back off or on over his shoes. But he did finally come to the fire.
I remember that because he was the first at the station. We filled 2 trucks and he was still standing on that right hand side there. I drove the second truck out, just waving to him goodbye, and he's there in his white singlet and his white fronts. Wave goodbye and just left there. So he didn't make the truck.
So the moral of the story is get your shoes off first.
Yeah.
Cam?
Well, as many of you may have seen, and we have our annual event and the Norton Award is presented, the Willys truck that we might mention along the way, Roger was quite a significant driver of that. Roger was a significant driver anyway, wasn't he? But we were heading down towards in the forest area towards Mount Misery, and there's a section down there that was very clay and all this red clay and one thing and another. It was very wet. It was in the winter time, and somehow or another, Roger, because we put into 4-wheel drive, and we're having a lot of trouble getting the truck out, and then things went very badly wrong with the gearbox. I think we managed to limp home. Didn't we limp home that day? I don't think we limped. How we got home, I'm not quite sure. But we had to get the truck was sold to us by a crowd at Narracourt, and they had to send someone up, and they took the gearbox off and took the appropriate cogs out, and then we didn't have 4-wheel drive then for a while till they managed to get some more gears. But anyway, Roger is well known for his exploits, and was the appropriate person to have that award named after. I must admit though also, I was only came up to Gorge Road. I don't come up to Gorge Road very often, especially down around Athelston. And as I came up the road, I said to my wife, I always remember coming up here. We had a fire down here on one occasion. And Roger was driving, and we were just sort of hanging fire in the shopping centre for a while. And all of a sudden, we were to take off, and sirens going, and one thing and another, airing up through into the gorge to a non-event at all. So Roger sort of didn't sort of get that message very well, and we did look like gooses on the back of this truck that was zooming along. Everybody else was wondering what we were doing. Now that's one. Another one was that we had a fire down at Eagle on the Hill.
Oh God.
You remember that, do you?
No.
Do you remember that, Cam?
Yes, I do.
What was so special about it?
Trees.
Tops of trees are light, so we decided we'd cut this tree down. Well, Roger decided he was going to cut it down.
Yes, thank you. We're all on the same page.
Can't do that one.
Gooses. You're talking about a goose, yeah.
We'll continue on.
Well, in actual fact, he got the saw out, and he had it 3/4 of the way down, cut down, jammed the saw. And we were really required somewhere else as well. And what was I going to do? We couldn't leave a tree there that's just about ready to fall over. And I was very close to sort of leaving Roger there with the chainsaw, and we were leaving him on the scene, but I'm not quite sure what happened there.
He, very seldom have I seen Cam get ruffled, but that day he did. By hell, there was, leave the chainsaw here in the tree, and then we're going to take the bar off, and and just leave the bar and chain the tree. And I think we ended up getting a rope up high enough, tied at the back of the tree, and we were able to move it enough to unpinch the tree. But we talk about a tree which is probably 1.3 metres.
It was a fairly big tree.
It's a big tree. And anyway, we finally got it down, but it took us hours.
Thereafter, we didn't usually try and utilise Roger in any chainsaw material.
No.
You referred to the Willies. The Willies was a good fighting unit.
Oh yes,
It
fantastic.
really did put Lenswood on the map. That was a hell of a unit,
Yeah.
wasn't it?
Oh yes.
We've had some very good units through the station.
Yes, I'm sure we'll mention something about that directly, actually,
Mm.
somewhere along the line.
Yeah, so how far do you want to go back?
As far as you like.
When we had the Willies and used to be stored in a shed down here. No, it's not the Willie, the Blitz.
Blitz, yeah.
Alongside the coal store down here, and yeah, that's where it was stored. And in the early days, we used to have the fire siren down by the shop, and that was in a telephone box. I know whether some of you guys can remember this. No?
No.
Probably can't?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well that's where I used to, every Monday night, used to go in there and test the fire siren. And it was always at 7 o'clock at night. And at the same time there was Bill Probert and Harley Mason. Each of those had a portable fire siren, and they used to do the same thing. I guess probably my first involvement was probably when I took over from John Stafford, that was the secretary at the time, and the president of the CFS at that time was Bert Copeland. And when we used to have our meetings, they used to be all around at the mission hall. And anyway, he was a great old fellow, and that's when he convinced me to put a price in to build this fire station. And so I did that, and anyway, I said to him, well, you know, I've only just started building, Bert, and I said I really haven't got the finances to do this. He said, look, I'll go guarantor for you. And anyway, as it turned out, this was the first building that I ever built in the town, and it turned out to be great for the rest of anyway.
And it's still standing.
It's still standing.
And was that land on Norton's place?
Yes, this land was donated by Clem Norton, and as it turned out also when we got to the stage where it only went to back that retaining wall just at the back here, and then Clem Norton had to give us more land to put the fire siren and everything up here. Yeah, so but that was probably the beginning of the history, and the old Blitz. Well, she was a marvellous machine, but I can remember that specifically that with this fire siren that used to be down. I used to live in a little room down behind the garage down there, and we got a call, and anyway, it all turned up here in the old Blitz, and there was fire. I was over at Kerry Gully, and so we all lined up here, and God bloody hell, the factory was flat. And what we had to do? We had to push the old bomb out and go down to Squires. Anyway, we didn't get it started, so Squires got it organised. Anyway, to cut a long story short, we got it all going and all the rest, and by the time we got over to Kerrigalla, the fire was already out.
I don't know whether you're going to bring up the history, but the issue of the first bits there's some issues about that.
Well, definitely a second-hand truck, but it would have been
A second-hand truck.
Yeah.
Is that what you call it? A clapped out army truck.
And there was a lot of them in this.
Oh, there was.
Service, wasn't there?
Yes, it was overloaded too. What's right? Look,
That changed.
look, you tell these people some of these stories, and they wouldn't believe them, would they?
No, overloaded, unreliable.
Because I can remember when the battery was okay. The idea was, and I'd had a Rex pump, a petrol pump, and everything was petrol in those days, of course. And what we had to do to start it, we had a petrol can for the back pump, and we had another little tiny one. We took a bit of petrol in and tipped that down the air cleaner to start the truck. That was pretty effective, actually, wasn't it? Yes.
Yeah, she did a good job for a lot of years.
Yes, but there was a challenge with it because I can remember a few places we went to. It had four-wheel drive but didn't have low range. And as a consequence, overloaded truck, a whole heap of people on it.
Ride the clutch a bit.
A lot, I think. And it got itself in some interesting situations. But anyway, we always seemed to get home.
Talking about interesting situations in trucks, I can remember when the Acco was brand new, the 610 Acco that we had, and that was back when we actually had to fundraise and buy the cab chassis, and then we didn't have enough money for the back, but we got the cab chassis. We had that for, it seemed like a long time, but it's definitely all over winter, and they had to wait for Phil Watton to build the back on it. So in the meantime, we got an old tray, just stuck a tray on the back, and I think you had a tank, didn't you? You had a tank we threw on the back, an old steel tank. We threw a pump on it, threw some hose on there, and that was our fire truck. So we had the Willies, we'd farmed off the old Inter C1300, that had gone, and the Inter Acco was sitting there. So it was a second truck, even though it was the new truck, but because of the way it was. And it was one night, it must have been, it wouldn't have been winter, but I know it's still wet, so it was probably early spring. We went down Fire Track 3, and we ended up heading, we were right down into the Sixth Creek Valley, and we weren't that far from Tony Bungy's place, and we were going around a particular sharp left-hand corner, and the Willies went up ahead, and the Acco was in behind, and the road was so narrow, and the truck was fairly long. We weren't used to the length of the truck compared to the previous trucks, so the front wheels went around, but then the back wheels were cutting in. Before we knew it, there was no land in between the front wheels and the back wheels. We couldn't go forwards and we couldn't go back, because the more we moved in the wet ground, it just kept moving over to the edge. Now, there's a drop off to the side, I don't know, it seemed like 1,000 feet, but it might have been this high. It was enough to roll the truck over. And again, I can remember this bloke over here, he was in all sorts of situations. Here's this brand new truck, we're about to roll it and haven't even got a back on it. Anyway, we ended up getting the Willies up around the top side with a chain, and we chained it onto the tray, and while we were trying to pull forwards and backwards, try to wriggle ourselves back up the hill, while the Willies was pulling. And this took hours. And anyway, finally we got it out, and we decided we'll drive home up the road, and we got home. Well, then John Scorgie was a member here. He lived down Swamp Road, tremendous contributions that he did to the brigade here. Anyway, he used to have a drink occasionally at the Norton Summit pub, and Tony Bungy walks in. Well, she was on then. When he found out that Lenswood went down there and churned up his paddock down there with the fire truck when we shouldn't have been down there. We all admitted we shouldn't have been down there, but anyway, we got the trucks out without any damage to them. But yeah, I think Scorgie and Tony Bungy stepped outside and had some fisticuffs about it. And anyway, that's the way John used to work.
You didn't say what time we got home that night, did you?
Oh God, it was late. It was very late. I remember that.
So the Acco, before it got commissioned, actually did a lot of work. We went to the Balhana floods, and that was quite amazing when the water was nearly up to the tray of the truck, There's water everywhere, and there was a transportable home that was water right up around it. And Roger came up with a great idea, better put a cable around it and hook it to a stubby pole to stop it from floating away. I remember the owners of the house weren't terribly impressed with that comment. They didn't think their house was going to float away. But there was a lot of water. That's probably the last time that flooded as severely. All the water's gone to the eastern states at the present. But,
that was, if you know, the bridge in Greenhill Road probably had well over a metre, probably a metre and a half of water over the top of them. So all of Bauhanna, every house in Bauhanna was flooded. On the bottom side of the Onkaparinga Valley Road. It was a big flood. Mind you, it was flooding up here. So
you wouldn't have attempted to go to the ford.
No.
That would have been chaotic. So in those days, David made mention at the start about the training. Well, they were really good days, right? We did more physical training and learning through experience rather than by the logbook or the manual that's out there now. And has it made any better firemen? Well, I think those days the guys got into it. They were nearly all off the land, and we had some wonderful experiences at training, whether it was water fights, and I know you guys probably not allowed to do water fights now, but it really did build camaraderie, and the camaraderie of CFS in those days was second to none. And our water fights with other brigades, they just guns. Lenswood were...
Remember the one at Bauhanna?
Yes.
The wet weather gear?
Yeah. So we were bull terrors, I think nearly every night we went home wet, but that was part of the fun.
Yeah.
But we did a lot of things. We did a lot of cliff climbing with Brad Hannaford. He came up and taught us, and it was down the duck ponds, and it was on the Peregrine Cliffs. There was a lot of really good training that you'd never. Well, I wouldn't do that now. Scared the bejesus out of most of us. But Brad had been through the SAS, and that was really good. And those moments still stay with us so many years later.
That one at the duck ponds we did, in particular, we got John Thorne, who was equivalent commander of SES back in the day of this area, and Stuart McLeod, who was the state training officer, come down to Canberra to come down to experience what we learnt about cliff climbing and vertical rescue. So anyway, we're at the duck ponds, and we got the waterfall that goes down, and we set up a hauling line up the creek. And the scenario was a victim down over the waterfall. We had to go down there, stabilise them, put them in a Stokes litter, and then we're hauling them back up again. And then bringing the two rescuers up as well. And then there's a lump of rock that sits out onto the right-hand side, and that's where Stuart and John was sitting up there, overseeing what we were doing and what was going to happen down over the cliff. Perfect view. Well, Brad and Greg Vickers were the ones that went to go over the waterfall. So they put on their harness, and in an instant, they tied on a abseil line, and it seemed like that time, Brad just jumped off the cliff, face first, ran down the cliff, pulled himself up down the bottom, got down there. Well, John Thorne and Stuart McLeod had kittens. They just could not believe that someone just jumped off this cliff. Had no idea about Brad's background. He did it as a bit of a stir. And then Greg went down abseil, normally down to the bottom. Well, after the event, we got the people up, everything else. And then after the event, they just couldn't help themselves to make basically chastising us over what the hell are you doing? Then they realised he'd served in many tours of Vietnam, in SAS and Black Ops and stuff like that, okay, you probably know more than what we do combined, so they let him off the hook, but he just did it as a bit of a stir for him. But we had some bloody good times doing that cliff rescue stuff.
You really asked or promoted several things which really is worth sort of recapturing on a number of issues. You're right in so much, Kim, we didn't do any sort of really formal training, but some of us did go to the Rosewall's training program at the Bridgewater Mill, the old Bridgewater Mill before it was converted to what it is now. And we did some more formal sort of work there, which helped us in a number of aspects. I think one of those was search. And actually it was search, but also manual handling. And very shortly after one of those courses, we had to do a search operation here in Lenswood. A man up Cold Store Road disappeared, and so the police were involved, but because in actual fact there was no sort of continuating circumstances that they couldn't bring the special police squad in, so they left it for us. I said, well, we've just done this search, we can do that for you, and we ran the command centre out of the station, and Sergeant Coleman, who was the police officer then, watched us. We did find a man in the creek, and just 100 metres away from where he was. He'd taken a shotgun and he'd taken his life, but he was right at the bottom of the creek. So it's one thing to find somebody, as to extricate them was another matter. And because we'd done some of this, I said, well, it's all right, we'll do that for you. And as a consequence of the whole operation there, the extrication as well as the search, the sergeant had come from Strathalbyn, where they had what was called then a civil defence, which was the early stages of the SES. And we became SES members as well, and that's why we've got some of the, well, we've got some of the, not much of it left down here, but we were SES people as well. And that took us into the cliff rescue aspect as well. One of the things which I think we were thinking about was that the Hyson Trail went through all this sort of area, and we thought, it's, what's the risks around here? And with people walking around, some of our interesting areas that we've got were likely to find somebody one day in a bit of trouble. Although that's been probably realised by the cyclists nowadays. But it was certainly interesting how we learned quite a number of other skills during those times of our training down there at Stirling, which was the early stages of the Brakunga Centre. I guess that's, I'm thinking of the truck, and I'm thinking because most of our members could drive in those days, because most of our members, most of them were taken up by orchardists around the place. So we were a very strong brigade in the daytime, when others were probably a little bit more challenged. But after hours is probably our weakest time. But we would go off on these tracks, and I sort of remember as we started to do that sort of thing, there were some interesting times in that. Where does this track go? And they followed the ridges down into Cherryville and that sort of thing. And as a consequence, we had to take these vehicles down there. I vividly recall another member who shall remain a member of the community, who we won't say who he is, but he remonstrated with us in relation to where we took the truck up on Mawson Road. And I looked, it was really nothing. But he said, I've had army experience. And his experience really was driving supplies from Alice Springs to Darwin during the World War II. And so when he was remonstrating with the fellows, I said to him afterwards, for heaven's sake, don't tell him where we really do go. Because he would have, I don't know what he would have done actually. But notwithstanding that, I think one of the challenges I think we had taking those trucks down there, everybody knew if something goes wrong, it is going to be wrong big time. Mm-hmm. And I think that sort of had an aspect of training where you looked after one another, and particularly the drivers. You took some of those 10-point turns, and if you didn't take the turn right, you had 200 or 300 metres straight over. So it was an interesting time, which I think also helped pull the brigade together pretty well. I think another time of that was when we we met on Monday nights, but this was an agricultural community, and as a consequence there was an agricultural bureau. They traditionally met on Monday nights, and they were looking for more members. But the members were all coming to CFS. It was such a fantastic, exciting sort of experience. Who would want to go to Bureau when they could go to CFS? So the Bureau changed their night for us. But David did mention John Scorgie, who was one of the characters that we picked up along the way. He was in the gold business, I think particularly to sell gold to dentists and things like that. And he took us on a time when in actual fact we went around to all of our mines in the area. And in actually one of those rescues, Dave, was down the Eclipse mine, if I recall. And so we hauled someone up over the outside the main shaft. I think that one in particular, again, when in actual fact you're doing these sort of things, people start to realise something goes wrong, then in actual fact you're going to go wrong big time, because we didn't muck around with dummy patients. Matter of fact, what I used to do is try and get a few young girls, so thought the fellas would look after them a little bit more, Warren. That's what I thought, that was my line, and which they did, of course. But when the night before we were going to do this training to pull someone up out of the shaft, a couple of them come to say, this is getting pretty dangerous now. We better have another bit more of a practice. So, but anyway, you'll be pleased to know that everything went swimmingly. Was really fantastic. But it does make a difference when people realise there's no room for error. And I think that was one of the good things about some of our brigade and training. However, when I do so, sorry to cut across because I don't want to forget this one either. When we started going on these tracks in the very early stages, many of them were just a bulldozer track. And I can sort of remember the fact that we would follow these tracks down, and a bulldozer track along the ridgeline usually brought up a whole lot of rocks. And I know that a few nights we spent some interesting nights, especially if you get a nice big round rock. And you can stand it up and roll it over the edge and watch it crash down through the valleys. And it was really fantastic, wasn't it? Until I came home one of the nights and I looked up our ordnance map. Oh, there's a house down the bottom of the valley. I think I had a very edgy 3 days after that.
I love good sized rocks too.
Yes.
Yeah.
So do you remember in the early days in the Blitz, and we ended up down at Cleveland, and that was the day when Noel Green was
Yes.
Noel Green was the captain, and this was in the very early days. And once again, we had an overloaded truck, and this fire was coming up from the bottom down there up into Cleveland, and anyway, I just can't remember who the bloke was there, but Noel Green. This fire was in a pretty precarious place, and Barry Schultz, and it was all of us guys were all young guys, early married, and anyway, we came back from down there, had a load of water, and Noel Green, they directed straight into the fire, and we went straight into in the middle of the fire, and Barry Schultz was actually driving, and we could see there was no way out of it, and anyway, he turned around in the middle of the fire, and out we came, Noel Green was ever so pleased, and we just had that pump going, and just a little bit of water with the sprinkler over the top. But do you remember that one? No, it was before
Vividly
your time.
remember that. It's one of those things from time to time. I don't know about you fellows, but you go through some of these places from time to time, and you think, this happened, that happened there, and one thing and another. And I always, whenever I go to Cleveland and go to the car park, I always remember that incident. Yes.
She was a pretty rip sort of fire, but yeah.
And there's many occasions, Warren, when you go into a place and you think, we shouldn't be here. And then to try and get out, or you've got a crew, another truck, usually a neighbouring town, supposed to be following you, and you get in there and there's no one following you. It's too hot for them and they've left you to your own devices, and that's where Lenswood likes to support Lenswood, because you don't always get the good support from other brigades, because they're bitumen road firefighters. Cam mentioned the mines before. One practice night, remember going out to Birdwood when we went down to that bloody mine there?
It was a good night.
I still have shivers about that. So it was it's just a straight ladder down. It's a long way down.
Couple hundred feet?
Yeah, and there's no safety. You just walk down this, you had to climb down this ladder and go underground and then come up again. But the underground tunnel, you're on your back. And I remember I'm following Martin Fry, who was a big lad then and he's a bigger lad now, and he was nearly stuck. And you're on your back and the bloody walls like on your face, and then you realise, I shouldn't be here. Yeah, well, Martin shouldn't have been here. It's all right for us little fellas, but that was a long way down. It was a hell of a relief to get out. But you find out people under certain conditions where they can handle, whether it's claustrophobic, whether it's too hot, or you really, when you get into those positions, you know you've got a good team around you because you've been through a lot of training, even though it's a bit bushy, but it really, you knew your fellow man that's going to be supporting you all the way through.
But you haven't really said that a week later there was a cave in that mine.
That's right. And Roy
Didn't really want to say that.
Yeah, and the ladder that was pinned into the clay wall, the chap who took us down there was climbing up or down, it doesn't really matter, but the ladder gave way and he hit bottom and he had to be rescued out. So that was only a very short time after we all climbed down it and climbed back up it. But talk about being claustrophobic, Campbell. Cam came up with this great idea many years ago, and we wandered over to the bowling club and he said, whose birthday's coming up next? So it was early December, so it was me. So right down in the drain, we're going to climb underneath the coal store. The drain that runs all the way underneath the coal store. Oh, this is going to be interesting. Oh, no torches. So in I go, dumb as paint, and I'm climbing through, and you just sort of, and there's a few that didn't want to go, but most of us went through, but there's a few that didn't want to go. And as you're going through, you got no idea, there's absolutely, you shut your eyes, and it's as black as that. And as we're climbing through, you feel this trickle of water coming in through here, so you'd say, there's water coming in on the left-hand side. Yep, righto. And then ages later, say, yeah, I've got that. And it sounded like they were right behind you, but in actual fact, they could have been 30 metres behind you. But it was just the sound just travelled that much. And that was, we ended up doing that about 3 times, I think, 3 or 4 times. But after that, we did use torches. And then when we did use torches, out that far southern end, what we call the new part, what was extended on it, we wish you didn't have torches because the pipes were so out of sync. They weren't round, they were egg-shaped, they've been squashed out and cracked. And here we are crawling through looking at them going, this is probably not a good thing. And anyhow, that ended up blowing out and it turns out it's about 45 feet below ground level, those pipes. But yeah, that was interesting times, climbing underneath the coal store, just for fun.
Was that before I did that extension and extended all those pipes down to the boundary?
Not after that.
Yes, it was after that. No, we went right, yeah, it was the full length.
Yeah.
It was the full
Right
length.
to the bend.
Yeah, right to terraces down. Yeah.
Because there was quite a few of those pipes before when I extended on there that were actually squashed in.
Yeah.
In the good old days, we used to do a lot of back burning,
Mm.
and we used to do a lot of burning off for farmers.
Mm.
And of course, we're not allowed to do that now.
Yeah.
And you know, people, the powers to be, why are we getting so bad at bushfires? Well, people aren't burning off,
Mm.
and I think that's a bad thing for CFS. It's good practice for crew members to burn off. One night we burned off this block of scrub here behind the fire station.
Mm.
We got in a bit of trouble over that.
Mm.
The Audrey Gadke,
Yep.
no, I shouldn't speak of Audrey. Of the dead, but she complained that we shouldn't be lighting up a big block of scrub.
Yeah.
But there's less and less burning off nowadays. Edge of roads, because with the amount of traffic coming through, we don't burn on edge of roads. And I noticed after the Cuddly Creek fire, there was all these wicks, one little creek, one road verge, one something else, just leading from one fire hazard to another. And, and I'd like to see down the track that we should be making farmers aware, growers aware, and giving them some support, especially if it's alongside of a road, because we as landowners can't always block the road off or have people on each end saying, look, it's only a burn off, it's only 3 metres wide, but it's making the community safe. And I think that's probably a step backwards from what would you call the bureaucracy in their wisdom has actually made us a more fire-prone region. And if you do burn, there's usually police there now. If you're just burning off, they come to see what's going on. It's really, it's made the district more fire-prone from what we used to do.
Yeah.
Well, none of those burn-offs ever got out of control anyway, did they?
No, because it was done in a civil time and with manpower. One of the things I noticed, being a member of the CFS for those years, you were game. You could take on the world because you had a good crew, good trucks, and you had water. Whereas now, as a landowner, there's only just recent years that we've got firefighting equipment. But before, you could burn anything. But now, in recent years, we haven't had the gumption to do that.
That's
But
right.
when you got mates there to help you, you can really clean up the area.
But Kim, I think that one of the things, if I go back a fair way, that made us what we are, or were, was the fact that what was happening. We used to probably have one decent solar fire every year, either in Stirling, in East Torrens or Gumaraka. And that was because they did some burning and got out of control.
Yeah, usually an apple harvest, wasn't it?
Yes, it usually was later in the year, that's right.
Yeah.
But that gave us the opportunity, because I must admit that I think of some of those times down there, we never had the opportunity to go to New South Wales in those days. Anyhow, most of the trucks in those days wouldn't get to New South Wales. Well, they were lucky to get to Murray Bridge to come to that. Because in the first Ash Wednesday, I think about half the trucks of the fleets of the CFS either never made it to the fire or didn't actually get home from the fire without some mechanical configuration. But it was the opportunity for us, because at least when you went out of your district, we could do what we... Oh, that's another thing too. We didn't have strike teams in those days.
No.
No, the thing was, in the very early stages, there were 3 radios in the district. Mr. Gale, who was sort of in charge of everything, including council, he had a radio. Jim Fry, which was one of our CFS fire control officers, he had a radio.
In the Fargo?
In the Fargo. Yeah. And then there was Rod Martin, who had the property where Cambridge alpacas are nowadays. He had a radio, and usually what happened, he'd go off to Stirling, and the idea was go and find Rod Martin. Well, the hope of finding Rod Martin was impossible. Anyhow, it was convenient if we didn't. As a consequence, we had a pretty free ride. Now, I have to say, and I will have to take some degree of ownership, I suppose. Noel did things pretty much by the book. I can't say that I did things by the book all the time because I thought that was too frustrating. It is better to sit on a hill somewhere and see where the thick smoke is and head for that direction. And that's why I think that we did so well as fire officers, because we did get a lot of respect.
Well, we were recognised as, we'll say, the Ace Carter of brigades in the district, really, weren't we?
I hope that the watchers of this video accept your thing, and I won't say any more to that. Because Warren and I, we were called on one occasion to go to Murdoch.
Yeah.
And well, we were called. That was urgent. They wanted someone to stop the fire getting across the Gorge Road, right at where the weir and the bridge is. Now, actually, we were pretty close to achieving that, didn't we?
Well,
close to it, because we also had Loberthal there, and Loberthal had some individuals who were pretty cautious about whatever they did.
Yeah.
Of course, they could have been cautious for us because one of the problems that Warren and I left in a big hurry. Stand up, Warren. Stand up. Stand up, Warren. Oh, you are standing.
And I'm even shorter now.
Well, we put each other's overalls on.
I couldn't work out how I was so lost. Yeah. It was,
We heard about this from Kumnick, I will have to say. But anyway,
Was that the Lauren Hardy show?
well, it certainly was. Anyway, we stopped at cross, except we did enlist the help of some Loberthal fellows, I think, did we not?
well, we did, but we virtually were telling them what to do. Don't you remember? And we sent them up the valley, and what's his name from?
Never mind names, for heaven's sake.
We won't continue on with the surname. But,
So a lot of those days, you didn't have the long hoses that the brigades have now. A lot of the time it was knapsacks and flathead. And they were big knapsacks.
That's right.
And they were heavy.
Yes.
And
Do you know how many knapsacks we've got on the truck these days?
probably count them on one hand with no fingers.
Yes.
Do you guys know how to use a knapsack? It's hard work, isn't it? And all those tough spots, you just man up, get going with half a dozen of you with knapsacks, and you'd stop the fire. So you're right in the fire.
yeah.
So it was pretty hard work, especially those big knapsacks.
They were.
They were heavy.
Mind you, we did have a lot of crew on those days, and I guess that you probably.
There was no limits.
No, well, I didn't like knocking people back very much, so there'd be plenty of times that we had 10 people on the truck. And I would say though that 10 people were working pretty hard. I often think that we don't have enough on the truck now, but that's it's occupational health and safety and all those issues that weren't there when we were involved, and thank goodness they weren't in some place.
But we went to put the fire out and to come home.
Well, I do recall, that's an interesting point in itself. I remember we were at
Harrogate.
well, you remember that one, but I'm thinking of Ashton. And we were having some refreshments at the Ashton Co-op, at the cold store. And all of a sudden there was a lot of scrub country behind the cold store. And it was quite a big fire. And all of a sudden it came in that there's a spark that got in a patch of scrub just further down towards Urada. And everyone piles in and tears off down here to this thing. But we were the last to go into this little spot. And they were all in there trying to work out what they were going to do. and I said, pull up in the middle, and the front engine was going, and about 2 up, we had it all out, and we tore back up. We were the first to get into this little section, we were the last to get into the section, and the first one out, and back up to the cold store for another cup of tea.
Remember that night we were sitting here and there was a thunderstorm and we had 3 fires that night. One was at Filsell's Hill.
Oh, yeah.
It was like nearly midnight or something. It was really hot summer's night.
Yeah.
There was one at Murdoch Hill.
No, that was a different. Oh,
That was a Horsell Gully one.
No, that was. I'll bring that one up.
But you know, we had 3 lightning strikes that night.
Yeah. That one at Filsell's Hill was a good one. So, but you're talking about the one at Murdoch Hill. Well, that day we had 3 fires. And
Horsell Gully one.
No, it started off at Jack Muller's.
Oh, that's right,
Jack Muller's corner,
Yeah.
the corner of Oakwood Road. And Willie's had gone. I said to Cam, I'll stay behind because I had a bit of a knack in starting the pump. And the old C1300, you had to get a rope and wind it on and give it a few pulls. And I had a bit of a knack, and I said, look, I'll stay back and I'll wait for a driver. Ashley Giles flew in because he had an old orange Falcon Ute, and the intersection was a bit different back then, and it was almost like a crossroads. And he used to virtually get it airborne over the main road. He'd lob her into the car park, so he drove. So that's the ability of his driving, it was pretty quick. So he's driving the C1300 down the swamp road, 1,500 litres of water on board with no baffles, and she's used to swing and rock and carry on a bit. I'm on the back trying to get this bloody pump going, and before we left we were a bit short on.
Just not the back, right at the back.
Right, you're hanging outside, you're looking at the white line going past you. And John Rowley came across from the coal store and said, oh, do you want a hand? We said, oh, you always could do with a hand. So locals used to jump on this, so we jumped on, and down we go, down the swamp road. We got to Brockhoff's, well, about where Anton's place is. And Spuddy Johns was coming the other way in his blue EH wagon. Well, he's on the wrong side, he's on the bank of the road because Ashley's running down the middle of the road and she's rocking like that. He's going flat out. And anyway, Spuddy just waves, arm at the window, waves, laughing as he always did. And we get down there, we're going through what's now Cobb's Hill, into the paddock, hit the fire up there, wonderful, everything else. The pump fails, and we're out of the picture. Well, John Rowley gets off, and then some lovely expletives that he had. He said, you buggers are mad, and he got off and walked home. And so anyway, we were sitting there, we put the fire out. The army barracks then had a fire service. They come out as well, so they're giving us a hand. Big red trucks. Next one was all this big pall of black smoke coming up from over Ashton Way. And power was out, no sirens, no communications whatsoever. Well, we might as well head that way. That's where we might as well go. So we left the army camp here at Oakwood Road. So we're driving up through Newland's place. And as we just get started, Greg Vickers is driving, Cam's in the passenger seat, and he yells out the window, we've lost the clutch. And there's about 4 or 5 gates as we went up through Newland's, which is now Joyce's. So going up Hidden Valley and heading up through there. So we're coming up to a gate, he'd slow right down. Someone would jump off the back, run forward, open up the gate, go forward, close the gate, chase up, catch the truck again. We'd keep doing this until we got all the way up to Bill Probert's up there on Deviation Road, because it looked like it was on Deviation Road. But it was over further, it was at Ashton. So we didn't have a clutch in the truck. So as we're coming, you talk about knapsacks, so as we come into the intersection of Deviation Road, well, Glenn Jules is coming out with the old Comma tip truck with an old knocker in it, and she was rattling, carrying on, and tip truck, and he had a tank in the back of the pump. Bev Dalton's in the back of that on his own. So we all grabbed a knapsack off of our trucks. We thought we're not going to miss out on this fire. Our truck's buggered. Our 1300's still sitting down the swamp road. That one's buggered. So we all grabbed the knapsacks off of our fire truck, chucked them in the back, jumped in the back with Bev, and off we go. So we left Cam and Greg with Willies to go to see the Peter Blythe and Peter Wright? No.
Yeah.
Was it?
No.
No, Cromwell's.
Peter Cranmer.
Pete Garage, yes.
Yeah, to see what he can do with the truck. So off we go to Ashton. We did a wonderful job at Ashton by the Masonic Hall there, and we put the fire out, and we were feeling pretty chuffed with ourselves. But at that stage, Cam rolls up with Greg. Greg jumped gets out. Roger Norton rolls up in his car. Greg had to get home. So Roger's now driving the truck. Well, they're having some refreshments and everything else. Well, this stage is very, very late in the afternoon. It was probably 7 o'clock. Next minute we get a call, there's a fire at Murdoch Hill. Well, Roger drove the Willies. I, to this day, have never been down Green Hill Road so quick in my life as that day. My God, I was shit scared. There was no coming back. This is it, we're going to die. Anyway, we finally get in. We finally get out to Murdoch Hill, and it was a running fire. It's where the olives are these days, up off Murdoch Hill Road. Anyway, we got this fire out. Because all the unprinted trucks were at Ashton at the same time, so we all had to race over there. And I can still remember there was the council come around, the little 3-ton tipper, and she had all these eskies on the back, full of beer and sandwiches. Beautiful. So we stopped what we did, sit down, have a beer and a sandwich. That's the last time we ever had beer in the fireground. Someone complained, they can't have beer in the fireground. That was it.
Probably last time we had decent feed, it used to be lettuce sandwiches.
Oh,
That's an interesting point, Kim, because I guess that, we have all these various aspects nowadays. You have to be fed, you can't be stopping on the fireground, for any other
8 hours.
8 hours. In those days, we came home when the fire was out.
Yeah.
And if we had something to eat, we were lucky.
Yeah.
Yes. And that doesn't sort of happen so much these days. But it's one of those challenges of the day that we had then.
Mind you, we had a fantastic ladies auxiliary.
Well, yes, we would be not appropriate if we didn't mention the ladies, because you and I would probably know particularly well that each of you probably see there's a reference to them on a board. But each year we would get the ladies together. It was a bit of a fun night actually, because usually the real material stuff of the meeting was, what sort of sandwiches do you want? There was a number of complaints about lettuce sandwiches and cucumber sandwiches and so forth on. But so it was. We tried to make that pretty interesting, because the ladies did give us as much as they possibly could in relation to refreshments and what have you.
Well, they'd assemble up here and get all the meals together, and then they'd bring them out to us.
That's right, and then we'd have to try and get them to the fellas on the ground.
Yes.
And that was a challenge in itself.
It was.
Yes, oh yes.
We don't get fed like that anymore, maybe.
Sorry?
We don't get fed anymore.
You didn't get it.
We don't get fed anymore.
No.
No auxiliary, there's no ladies auxiliary, there's no catering, there's no food that comes in. So we have to be self-sufficient these days.
Yeah, well, before, even after this built, all the radio system and everything was all operated out of the business down there. Lenswood Gas Centre, that was my business, and one of the rooms there was, we had all the radio communications and everything there, and my wife and Cam's wife and
labels.
Rosemary? Rosalie Green.
Rosalie Green, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I wish Martin was here because he could probably relate it. But I can remember when before the station was as it is now, it was just where the trucks are. And there was talk and procrastination about knocking that back wall out and heading right back to where the station siren tower was. And anyway, so this went on, and to us blokes it seemed like there was a bit of procrastination in the committee. So Cam was off at a group meeting or went off somewhere to a meeting somewhere. And we used to sit down there, freezing cold, around with these bloody steel old chairs and having a cup of tea or a cup of coffee or something. And Martin just wandered over to the SES trailer. He just wandered over to the SES trailer, grabbed the big sledgehammer. We didn't think too much of it. Martin did funny things like that. He just walks over to the best block wall, go to the big hit, bang! He goes another hit, bang! He just kept going. Before Cam got back, we'd taken out the whole back wall of the fire station. Knocked her out.
And then we were cold.
And it was bloody cold because it's winter time. So then we sat there in winter time. I think we put a tarp up there for it. But the whole thing was to hasten up Moody to open up the purse strings and let's get this bloody thing out there. This damn thing built. So then on Monday nights, we were digging a lot of that out by hand and then come in with a tractor and front end loader a bit and tip trailer and dig her out. And then we ended up with a lump of rock in that back corner. Back corner. And the Filser boys were around then. They had powder monkeys licence, and one Saturday morning they came in and drilled some holes in there, and we'll get this out. And anyway, they put a couple of plugs in there and threw some carpet over the top to contain the blast. Well, I don't know whether it was Mark or Ian or both of them, but anyway, they didn't quite synchronise the fuses. And the first one went off, bang, and that took the carpet off. And then, about 3 seconds later, the other one went off, bang, and there was a basketball-sized rock like that. She flew out and she landed in the back door of Mrs. Classam's house next door. And we were always getting told off for being too noisy. So it was like the troops at Gallipoli running out the trenches. We scurried out this 6 foot deep hole in the back here, like as if it wasn't even there. Raced over and grabbed this rock, carted it back, chucked it back in the hole, and dived back in the hole before Mrs. Classam ever found out about it.
Yeah, we were scared of it.
Oh, jeez. We're always getting told off.
So where was Ian? I mean, we used to have Ian.
He was sitting on the veranda with his big fat smoke.
Was that when I was originally building for the foundations for that?
Well, then you came in and then you dug out the foundations and we put in the back part of the building in it.
Oh yeah, that's right.
It hasn't all been good though.
No.
We've had a few tragedies where car accident and motorbike. I think a motorbike went under your ute with one of your drivers at Clover Hill.
Yeah,
Steve.
Yeah. And the lady that got burnt on
Collinsville.
Generally, we're pretty lucky that we haven't had too many deaths, but they were quite tragic, those two in particular. But nowadays, CFS is more lot to do with people falling off their push bikes out there. But as a district, I think we've been serviced really, really well by CFS here, and the lads that have been and are continuing to give service to the community through CFS.
No, it has been wonderful. There's no doubt about that. But David has mentioned Martin, and I really would like to say something about Martin. David's been on the issue of the last few weeks about the person who sits on the passenger side, the driver, is the person in charge of the truck. Well, I have to say that I gave the role of being in charge of a truck to Martin on Ash Wednesday. He was in a truck at the up there at just by Anderson Hill. First time he's ever been in charge of a truck. On Ash Wednesday, when the fire's coming out of the forest, there were probably 1.5 kilometres of forest that's been fanned by a north wind on a very, very hot and hazardous day. And I
You had a bit of trouble with your motorbike, I believe, Cam.
well, not that too, but I was thinking of poor old Martin, and I often think about that when we talk about he was in charge of the truck, because you never know quite what you're really going to be.
Baptism of fire.
Eh?
Baptism of fire.
Well, that was a pretty deep baptism, I thought, because there will be very rarely that you'll ever see anything quite like that came out of the top of that hill. Well, I don't know. Was you on the Willies that day?
No, we were down at Barnes's.
Oh, that's right. You went down to Barnes.
Yeah, that went over.
That's right. Yeah, you went over the top of you, yes. Yeah. But notwithstanding that, yes.
That was the time when you were on your motorbike.
Yeah, it was. But
right. And I was with your vehicle.
Yes.
With the radio and that in it.
Yes.
You're up there feeding the dogs, weren't you, Kit, Warren? You're up there checking on the dogs, weren't you?
Yeah, well, I was just going to tell the story. And anyway, we heard that the fire had jumped across Kangaroo Creek. Right, Cam went down on his motorbike. He went down to the reservoir, came racing back and said, it's jumped over, and anyway we raced up, and of course at that stage we just managed to start to assemble a lot of the units along the top road, Mawson's Road,
Yeah.
and anyway we knew what was going to happen, and anyway it turns out that Cam was up on the top of Mawson Road, and I had his son Michael in the vehicle, and I think, would it been was it Marty Fry? Somebody else was in there.
No, well, Martin was on the truck.
Oh,
He's in the app.
yeah. Anyway, so it turned out that we could see we were in trouble, and you know where the dog kennels and that were, and Cam's up the top on Mawson Road, and then the fire hit. Cam's in the middle of it, and he's get a mayday call, and he's rolling around on the fire. The next minute, the motorbike's on fire, and I've got to take refuge with the boys. We went into the kennels, and also then there was what's her name? Vanessa, yes. She was about to go straight around to into the fire. I managed to stop her and got her into the house there, and there's a pool there. We managed to get the fire pump going, and the sprinklers along on the front fence, and there was we were battling to anyway. So as she came up to the top, and the fire comes up the top, well, us three were in the dog kennels, in the kennels themselves, and next minute fire hit over the top. When it suddenly died down enough, the sprinklers on the front of the house there, they were melted. Yeah, but,
So were there any dogs in the kennels? Any dogs in the kennels?
I can't remember whether there was or not. Anyway, and then of course we got the mayday call with Cam, and it turns out that the Lenswood unit was just down. Didn't realise it for the time, but the Lenswood unit was just down below, about 500 metres below, I think, wasn't it?
Well, something like that, I think, yes.
Yeah. And then after all that's over, and we got into the vehicle, and we virtually followed the fire right through to Birdwood.
Yeah, well, we did go over to when everything sort of, because the wind changed, it was a massive wind
changed, yeah.
Which took it into Cudley Creek and towards Kersborough, and we finished up on the evening out on Checkers Hill Road, didn't we? And
yeah.
that section, yes.
I was very proud to be part of the organisation in the way we all combined together, and it was really well, I still say it now, that the Lenswood Brigade in all the time that I was involved, that it was still to be the ace card of brigades within the Onkaparinga district.
Cam?
Well, I've got quite a few things down here that I've still got, but I guess that one of the things is, as well as being an effective firefighting organisation, because you really want to be that, especially in your own community. But we really had some fun times, and I think that camaraderie is a pretty important part of the of maintaining a good brigade. When anyone had a birthday in those times, it was their responsibility to bring a cake. And then we'd count out how many were there, and if there was 10 people there, the cake would be cut into 12 pieces, or something like that, so that afterwards we could spin the bottle, and the winners of this bottle spinning could have an extra piece of cake. So that was one of the things was a tradition for a long, long time. Now we couldn't go beyond the fact that we would go out from time to time and have a yabby night. And so we knew all the dams around the place, even particularly those down in the forestry area. We knew where the yabbies were, and so we would go off and have a big night on the yabbies.
I think we even snuck into a few places too, didn't we?
Yes. But you mentioned John Scorgie again, who he had his wife under control because that's not the joke part. Because we catch all these yappies, and she was instructed to cook these yappies up for us for the next Monday night.
And clean.
And
And make a sauce.
She did a pretty good job. Mind you, he hasn't got that wife anymore.
Well, she actually also knitted all of us balaclavas.
Yeah.
Oh, she did too, that's right.
Red and green balaclavas we all wear on winter time when we drive around the trucks. It's so bloody cold at night. We wear these bloody balaclavas.
Now, it wouldn't also be a good night without mentioning our fishing expeditions. We knew all about these, went quite regularly down the Sixth Creek, and we knew about the fishing. So one night we thought, or one day, I think we went on a Saturday afternoon, was it?
No, it was one night, one hot summer's night.
When we went, well, now just to make got two fishing issues.
Oh, okay.
We went spearfishing the trout that we saw in the big, there by the ford at the end of the Lemons. So yes, we prior to that we went on a Saturday afternoon to do some tickling of trout. We heard about that, and we went all down that creek tickling. Didn't tickle any trout apparently, because that eluded us, and whether our system was not good enough I don't know, but anyhow, no trout. But there was this big trout swimming around in the pool, and we lined ourselves up with all sorts of spears, didn't we? And we did catch the fish actually. So it would be an admission if we didn't sort of mention some of these extra activities that are not normally associated with.
They're not in the manual.
No. We're an hour manual, but our manual was different than everybody else's.
Mind you, you wouldn't be able to do it these days.
Well, who would know?
Well,
We probably wasn't supposed to do it in those days.
yeah, well, probably not, no.
Yes. Now there was another time we used to go on these tours, as I said, and I always used to look out for my crew as much as I possibly could. And as we were coming up Blockers Road, one night I said, "Righto, fellas, stop here, up over the bank. There's a strawberry patch just there, and we'll have a feed of strawberries." Well, we were rummaging around. We couldn't find any strawberries. For the love of money, we just couldn't find any. And I found out a few weeks afterwards when I went down there, they weren't strawberries, they were violets. That's right. So that was a bit of a disappointment. Also, the old Blitz, we had a chap called Ern Dearman, and he was very high up in the CFS, and he was sort of the man in charge there for a while. And one of the things we used to do, just to announce the fire season, we would have this tour around the district on a Saturday morning. And we'd start off at Woodside, blow the siren, and everybody would go through the town of Woodside, the sirens blowing, and then we'd head off down to Balhanna and do the same thing down there. And we'd come up at the Forest Range. This was the Adelaide Hills Council, or the Old Kumnick Council then in those days, of course. Come down through Forest Range, send all the sirens going, come up through here, sirens going, through Loberthal, sirens going, out the cane on the corner, and we come down there and we set the sirens going again, and the cattle were going crazy, and the horses were going crazy. We only did that for a couple of years, and I didn't know it.
But everybody knew it was fire season.
Well, they certainly did that.
Yeah.
Although I do remember that one of the times the old Blitz was getting pretty slow, and so the whole group went through. A bit later on, Blitz goes through. They're all saying they went that way. So yes.
So was Ern Dearman before Fred Gale, or Fred Gale's after Ern?
No, I think they're a bit about the same time actually, because Fred Gale was the chairman of the council, And
Yeah, but he was more than that, wasn't he?
well, he was king of the castle. That's what
Yeah.
you probably say. Yes,
Mm.
yes. But Ernie Demon, he seemed to have. He was pretty.
Heard the fire, had
Oh,
his flag.
Yes, he'd have his flag flying and all that sort of stuff. So that was a tradition he did for some time.
Remember you get involved at Gamble Palmer's and near Ossick Road?
That was not a good night, was it?
Remember you tooting?
Tooting. Yeah, that was a bad road. We got bogged a few places here and there, but that and Sandy Waterhole Road got bogged out there a bit. We really haven't had. We've had probably Black Sunday and Ash Wednesday. Is that the second one?
83.
They were the main fires through the district. Well, we had Cudley Creek Fire, got a bit of the district, but really the district has fared pretty well. That we haven't had a real major fire in the last 60 years. The Cudley Creek Fire could have been a lot worse. It could have gone northerly and taken out our whole district. We've been probably fairly lucky that when the fires have been, we've been able to contain them to some degree to margins of the district, not the whole district. One of the things I had here that who's looking after your place when you're out fighting the fire, and we really people that go to fire go willingly to help others, and we probably need to have some system that there's other people coming to the district to support, and we're probably starting to do that with the farm units that we haven't had organised in the past, but that's starting to be a secondary where the farmers can actually, or the growers can actually go out and help. Because quite often the unit has gone somewhere, or the fires are so broad that you can only be in one place at a time. And so I raise the point of who's looking after your house and your garden when you're out fighting the fire. And we probably need to encourage the rest of the district to come out and support the district that's getting burnt. A lot of people stay home, look after their place. But it's very different going to a fire when it's in your district, on your neighbour's place or your place when it's getting burnt. Very different from fighting a fire out of the district when you don't know it. And particularly the Cudley Creek one, when it comes into our district like that, how dare it invade into our district and burn our neighbours, burn our properties. There's a lot of resources in the district, I think, that can be harnessed to do a little bit more than just stay home on their own places.
Well, we used to use that. If you remember when we had the fires coming up from Mount Misery, and you had Bob East, who was had an excavation business, and he'd be out even in the middle of the night, bulldozing tracks and everything through to bulldozing fire breaks. And I don't know, was it Stewie Marshall? Stewie Marshall was another one. We had a lot of assistance in those days.
So I see that nowadays people expect the CFS to put the fire out. Well, got news for them. CFS can only do so much. And on such a broad fire that we had this in 2019, that we really need to go back to the community to and get them engaged to come and support CFS, but really support our community, because the boys can only be in one spot or two spots at once. And
there is a challenge though, and in a discussion I had with someone the other day, and we were talking about Loberthal, and a strike team had come into Loberthal, and some might have heard already that strike team were not prepared to go in a number of places because they thought it was too dangerous. I then also heard that the MFS were not prepared to go up Post Office Road because they thought it was too dangerous. And so, you can argue several ways, because unless you've been in a situation, it's probably a bit difficult to work out what is dangerous. I can remember, David, I'm looking at you at the moment, and I can remember down at Horsefall's Gully.
Yeah.
You were probably there.
Yeah, we went.
And we were on a group, and we were holding it on a little road.
Coach Road.
Thank you, Coach Road, yes.
We did the fire break down over there.
Yes, we did, and it was probably the hottest thing I've ever been in. And I remember David Kumnick. I can just sort of visualise him. His head's just peeping up above the pyramid like a German gunner.
German.
The paint was peeling off the side of the truck. But in actual fact, whilst it was very hot, I wouldn't have said it was absolutely dangerous. Mind you, the smoke wasn't all that flash. But one of the other things I think that we have to be very careful about, especially we had long hoses, they're on roadsides and the roadside vegetation.
Yeah.
And if you get out too far, and it's a long way back to the truck, and if the red vegetation on the side of the road's significant, that is a problem in itself. And I can remember one time it separated some of us, and I've always remembered that, and it's a little bit of a flag that need to be a bit careful about.
Well, there's plenty of time with the 8.5-inch hose, canvas hose, we used to go a long, long way down into the fire ground with that.
Yes, yeah, that's true. We were one of the first, I think, to marry up with the forestry people. We've got all those lay flat hoses, and they had a very cluey fellow in the forestry there for a while. We developed quite a number of that, and that system and some others. And we were one of the first brigades that sort of took that on, and we had a bit of a time with the forestry people there for a while.
Because the rubber hose can be pretty heavy.
Oh, very heavy, yes, absolutely, yes.
There is some husbandry that we should be doing within the districts every year, and CFS has a really good role to play to assist growers, farmers, landowners, just to make it a safer district. So as you get a bit older, you start to be a bit wiser. We can't always go out and on the end of a hose, but maybe we can do it. Clean up the places when it's a lot cooler, a lot calmer. That CFS has been a really good training ground for not just camaraderie, but you get to, when we used to deliver water, we get to meet a lot of neighbours, a lot of different people. You knew your community a lot more, and since I haven't been in CFS, I've lost that connection with a lot of the community. But CFS was a great way of meeting people, and
that's a very good point, actually.
And knowing who's out there and giving them encouragement as well.
Yeah, it was all pretty interesting. These guys probably wouldn't remember that, but when I was the treasurer or whatever, and we raised a lot of money, and I run a subscription scheme for all the people in Lenswood Forest Range. I had all their names and send them all out a notice. It was a voluntary thing, and large percentage of the people all donated to that, and we made thousands and thousands of dollars out of that, and it worked out extremely well.
You did a very marvellous job, Warren, in fostering all that, and which put us in a better financial position than just about all the other ones in our group. We were so much better off than the others.
Yeah.
Well, having said all that, we've been chatting now for a reasonable amount of time. Probably time to wind up. But I'd like to thank Warren for coming along, and Cam, of course.
Appreciate that.
And Kim coming back again, and just to try to catch up and document what we can sort of remember or can still remember it.
Yeah.
So I personally thank you for coming along, and
I appreciate that.
Thanks for Peter for filming.
Your dad hasn't been mentioned.
That's right.
David's dad was Don was a very integral part of the CFS in those early days.
Very much. He's my captain.
Yeah. So what have you got to say, David? Can you remember your dad and your followed up your dad?
I used to often talk about big fires or stuff like that. But you know, times were different back then. It was, you only had fires. These days, we get, you know, fires are only a small part of our call out. So the whole service is totally different now. So, but yeah, we still get the big fires, but we do a lot more than just that.
You know,
We're done.